Welcome back to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail, episode 7 and part 2 of our Christmas review / last weekend's racing. So this is as busy as it gets this episode. So get the notebooks at the ready. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as ever by Donn McClean and Matt Toombs. Donn, I think we always start with Matt and how was your weekend? So Donn, take it away with your punting weekend. A few near misses, you were saying.
Well, I changed a winning formula, that. Look, it's good weekends racing, really good. I was kind of chatting to my dad yesterday morning, yesterday morning. He was going, there's no good racing this weekend, is there? And I was like, there really is. You know, you don't have the superstars of Christmas or Cheltenham, but still, and obviously the fact that the Lawlors of Naas race got moved back to Friday. Gallia de la Toe, she was my kind of near miss for the weekend. I suppose if it had been over 4.25 miles, she might have got there, but she stayed the trip anyway. We know that. No, she ran well. She ran well in the trip, but no, good racing all around.
Yeah, fair play to Naas, free in, and it seemed a decent atmosphere there on track as well. Brilliant track. Matt, same to you. How was your weekend, punting wise? There was a lot of racing. You said you didn't even get the chance to watch Manchester United versus Tottenham because there's just so much racing to cover.
Yeah, that's right. Nice position to be in with loads of good races to be watching. Big on the vets race. Takes one to know one, I guess. And I've had a bit of luck in that in the past. And I've got a bit of a theory about it being a plot race and horses who are lower in the handicap than they were at the start of the season. So managed to get onto Sam Brown at a decent price. So that made the weekend. So not complaining.
I've already put in Matt for next year's Veterans Chase weekend, Matchbook Weekend Racing podcast. Don't worry, listeners, we will have him and he will pick the winner for us next year. So yeah, we're going to run through the second half of Christmas racing, which is all the open company races. So no, a lot of them been done to death, but a few nice theories, few nice trends too from Matt as well. And then we'll move on to this weekend's racing. We'll go to our eye catcher section. Some fascinating horses, I have to say, and a when to pull the trigger bet as well. So stay tuned too. Oh yes, before you get going, do subscribe completely for free to our YouTube channel. Best way to keep up to date, and hit that like button. And of course, do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange daily for your horse racing markets. We'll start with the King George and look at the trends here, Matt, and maybe your thoughts on the race here. So firstly, we all, I think everyone knows the type of horse in the King George that goes on to Cheltenham, but give us the facts on Ryanair Gold Cup horses and then what you thought of the race itself.
So in the Gold Cup, winners are 5 from 20, 14% loss. Runners 9 from 68, 38% loss this century. By contrast, in the Ryanair, runners are 8 from 35, 17.49% profit. It's produced more festival winners this century, 17, than any other race, which befits its historic standing, mid-season championship race in the Blue Ribbon division. But with the power shift westwards across the Irish Sea, the Savills Chase is, as was the case this year, often a stronger contest. So trends need considering in that context. Don Cossack 8 years ago, the last Gold Cup winner to run in the King George. I think the more relevant trend at the moment is the Ryanair trend. Ryanair is often won by horses that started the season with championship race pretensions, the Champion Chase or more usually the Gold Cup. If it doesn't work out, they often go for the Ryanair in the end. And sometimes horses that don't perform in the King George get underbet when dropped in class to the Ryanair. So history suggests that you shouldn't write off Allaho simply because he didn't excel here. The race itself was curious. Normally the fast, unrelenting pace, especially on good ground, finds plenty of good horses out and they never get back into it. But Frodon won his King George by Bryony setting a gallop and then promptly slowing it down, which he did again here. Then as soon as the race picked up, Hewitt was ridden with a circuit to go under the whip 6 out. Until this year, I'd never seen a horse outpaced much of the way round win a King George and on good ground. My instinctive reaction is that he was beating 2 formerly top-class horses, Brave Man's Game and Allaho, who are now on the downgrade and finished tamely. But Brave Man's Game was inconvenienced by Shishkin coming down. Normally, I'd have quite a strong view about how likely a horse who's a length ahead when coming down 2 out was to have won if they stood up. Just hard to know what the mercurial Shishkin would have found at the business end. Consensus is he had won, and whilst that's the most likely scenario, I think I'm more open-minded than most. What I do think is that horses that get knowing like this tend to get more and more tricky. I expect to be opposing him going forward. I'd be surprised if all the other jockeys in the Gold Cup was obliging at the start as they were here. It is worth noting that on officially good ground, Hewitt's last 6 runs have been 1-1, 1-1, U1. And the unseat was when he may well have won the Kerry National off 163. It was officially soft ground, probably a mixture of that and good to soft when he fell 2 out in the Gold Cup. My guess is he'd have been about 10 lengths third if he stayed on his feet. And the ground was officially good to yielding and disappointed in the Galway Plate, but the winning time as the slowest since the last time it was officially soft 11 years ago. So conditions wouldn't have suited him there. So there's a case to be made that he's a completely different horse on genuinely good ground. If we get that on the Gold Cup, he ought to improve from last year. Now, whether we'll ever see genuinely good ground at the festival again is a question mark. But if we do, it's likely to be on the new course and on Friday. So Hewick isn't an Ante-Post proposition. But if he is as ground dependent as I've suggested, he's one to keep an eye on for backing in festival week if he looks like he's going to get his conditions.
Yeah, it's a good point you make. It always feels during Cheltenham week, you get a bit of that drying weather, the Thursday, the Friday. Obviously, when we move into the new course that just come the Friday Gold Cup, it could be the driest of the week. So maybe don't completely rule out Hewick. Don, I thought Ruby Walsh was very interesting on Allaho. You know, some people might look at that race and think he might have ran pretty well, but he seemed that he was only going as fast as he could, whereas you've seen his Ryanair performance that he was managing to spring on. Now, I would say he is a horse that improves for the spring, but he's probably not the horse he was. Whether that he's still good enough to win a Ryanair, who knows?
Yeah, look, I know that the King George has been talked about an awful lot, but interesting points that Matt makes there. And on Allaho, yeah, like when his Ryanair Chase wins, the what defined them was his relentless gallop, and that's over 2 miles, an extended 2.5 miles. You'd think over 3 miles he would have been able to just keep on going with that relentless gallop, and he's won a Punchestown Gold Cup, so that he would be able to maintain it over 3 miles for King George. So it was, it was disappointing that he couldn't go and do it. But look, he's 10 now. He's gone 10. He had that time off, albeit it was for his spleen. It wasn't for a tendon or anything like that. So there's every chance that he can come back to his best. And as you say, Dan, he's better in the spring. He'll probably improve again. But yeah, like he's just, it was disappointing that he couldn't go and win a King George, because it kind of fell from, didn't it? But when Shishkin unseated, Brave Man's Game was hampered, like even into that second last fence, about a length behind Brave Man's Game. And when Brave Man's Game was hampered by Shishkin, he was about 2 lengths in front of him, then halfway between the second last and the last. So it was set up for him to go and win it. And in the end, even like Hewitt came from the clouds, as Matt said, and he wasn't able to hold off Brave Man's Game for the runner-up spot. And that was after Brave Man's Game was hampered. I was surprised that Paul Nicholls didn't put Brave Man's Game in the Ryanair Chase. And I know there's a supplementary entry phase later on, so it may well be that he'll reconsider that, because it does look like the race for him now. He doesn't fully see out the goal. Well, look, he finished second in a Gold Cup, but he was beaten for pace or for stamina in the end by Galloping the Champ last year. So I'd say if he was in the King George, he'd be interesting in that. And he didn't have a great preparation for this race. He had his defeat in the Charlie Hall Chase, and as we said at the time, Daniel, if he'd gone straight from the Charlie Hall to the King George, he would have fancied his chances more than going and taking a Betfair Chase on really soft ground, which, after which he was a very tired horse. So I thought he ran better than I expected him to in the King George, actually. And look, Hewick, he's just an unbelievable horse. He's an anomaly. He cost 850 quid at Goresbridge as a 2-year-old. He's won a Galway Plate, a Whip, or a Bet365 Gold Cup, a Grand National Hurdle at Far Hills. He probably would have won that Kerry National that Matt mentioned. Yeah. And he probably would have finished place in the Gold Cup. As Matt said, the ground is so important to him. And Shark Hanlon said that beforehand, before the King George. And he walked it like he was just about happy that the ground was good enough for him. So he's continually an underrated horse by lots of people, including me. But he's just a superstar. And if it came up good in the Gold Cup, who knows?
Just the last thing on Hewick, the €800 thing, it's been done to death in the racing world, so it's sort of like an in-joke, but 5 or 6 people came up to me on St. Stephen's Day after the King George saying, that's amazing. The non-racing people, that's amazing. Hewick's won the King George. Can't believe he cost €800. So I think it's important in the racing world that we keep drumming that, and how amazing the story it is, Don, because I feel like, well, me personally, I was a bit annoyed myself for not sort of leading with that one, sort of tweeting it out and stuff, because in my head it's been done to death, but it clearly hasn't if people are still only getting to the story now in a King George,
It's a phenomenal, like the King George, it's kind of the, it's up there just a short head behind the Gold Cup. Like what a race to win. And like, but the story is great because Shark Hanlon, he lives not far from Goresbridge. He went to see another horse, noticed this horse walking around, liked his walk. He went home and had his lunch, and then went back and paid 850 quid for him and got him home with him. So it'd be only Shark Hanlon to do something like that and go and win the King George.
He's a brilliant guy, a great guy, and we're lucky to have him in race and sticking to the sort of 3 mile open division, looking at the Gold Cup. Matt, hit us with the trend on the Savills Chase, because you touched on it there, and I'll bring Don in on Galloping the Champ.
So runners are 7 from 63 in the Gold Cup, small loss. Only 3 of the winners were doing the double. Statistically, just a fair record. Power shifted westwards across the Irish Sea. Savills has got stronger as the King George has got weaker. And 8 of the first 14 renewals this century were won by British trained horses, which seems a very long time ago now. Best Mate, Denman and Synchronised all followed up in the Gold Cup. It's a different race now, and even with the significant non-runners, on paper, it still looked a fair bit stronger than the King George. So the fact that no winner has gone off to win the Gold Cup since Synchronised shouldn't put you off Galopin Des Champs. I'd look at it more that the fact that beaten horses have won 3 Gold Cups and 2 Ryanairs in the last decade is indicative of how deep the Savills tends to be now. So if you can find an excuse for a beaten horse, they may provide value in the Gold Cup, especially if dropping down in class to the Ryanair. And finally, it's worth noticing that with the cross country having become a race for ex-Grade 1 horses now, it can be races like this that cause the switch. 4 runners have contested the cross country after running in the Savills, all in the last 3 years, finished U1, 2, 3. Conflated was well beaten when unseating at the last, and having apparently scored very well over the cross country banks, he looks likely to head to that race now.
Yeah, that cross country is just insane. That top 4 in the market, to be honest with you. Donn, Galopin Des Champs, they rode him a bit differently, a bit like they used to, and it sort of it felt like it brought the spark back. Maybe almost looking at, because we've been analysed the race now, but looking ahead to that Gold Cup, are they going to ride him again, similar to what they did in the Savills? And so essentially, we're going to see a completely different Gold Cup to last year.
Yeah, you'd imagine they would. I don't think that the intention was to be as far back as he was last year in the Gold Cup. It was a kind of a messy start. There were kind of 2 groups coming into the tape, and they kicked off. I'm not sure everybody realised they were going to go at the time, and he was well back in the field. That said, Paul Townend rode really the perfect race. The sectionals tell you that, and he just bided his time. Once he was dealt the hand that he got, he was in behind early on, and he bided his time and made his way through. And if he hadn't given Ian Maximus the ride that he gave him to win the Irish National, he probably would have got ride of the season for Galopin Des Champs. But it was great to see him back. And you talk about stories in racing, and Hewick obviously is a massive story. But Galopin Des Champs, like the buzz that he created around the place on the day, and when I actually watched the race in the stands, and when he was coming up to the last, you weren't so sure how far clear he was because it's kind of head on. But he jumped it. Suddenly it was apparent he was well clear, like 10 lengths or thereabouts. And he just kept on going up to the line. He finished like a fresh horse. But the buzz and the hum from the stands as he was coming up to the line and going past it, like people realised that they were seeing a champion. It was brilliant to see him back, because he was disappointing in the John Durkin Chase for sure. And that was after being beaten in the Punchestown Gold Cup. And then you're thinking, as was well documented or was high profile notion, maybe the Gold Cup bottomed him out, but not a bit of it on that evidence. And good to see him back. I thought Conflated actually ran very well, because he went around the inside, and Sam Ewing had no option really, because that's the way he jumps. He goes to his left, and it probably wasn't an advantage to go around the inside on the day. The ground was probably better towards the near side, and I know he unseated at the last. I think Gordon Elliott said he was going to maybe go for the Irish Gold Cup first and then on to the cross country. So I wouldn't. He does go really well at Leopardstown, so I'd still keep him in the back of your mind. And Capodanno was the other horse I thought ran well. Again, he was close to the inside, and it was a nice step forward by him from his run at Thurles on his seasonal debut. And I know he ran in the National last year, and he was pulled up in the end, but actually he didn't run badly. He was right there until about the third last before he started to tire, and he didn't have an ideal run into the race last year. So I know he'll have plenty of weight in it, but he's only 8. So I think Capodanno is one to keep in the back of your mind as well.
Yeah, backed him for a Gold Cup. I don't know what year, probably 2 years ago, I'd say, Capodanno. But yeah, definitely an exciting horse to keep an eye on. It's great to see him running a decent race. We'll go to Jerry, Matt, you touched on if you can find an excuse for a beaten horse. Jerry was ultimately disappointed, but Don's right, and it's a good point on the head on. I never really thought of it. I just always thought I was losing. I couldn't really figure out where everyone was on the chase track in Leopardstown coming to the last. I just felt like maybe it was me, but I'm glad to hear other people struggle with, you don't know how far clear a horse is. Basically what I'm getting at is you felt Jerry was in the race maybe until Galopin jumped the last and you realised how far behind he was.
Yeah, the crucial point about him was quite a few of them seemed to get buzzed up before the start of this in the parade ring. And Jack Kennedy had his feet out of the irons. So I wonder whether he ran his race before it started. He might give him a pass for that. Just wanted to look forward to Cheltenham and look at third season chasers and beyond. There appears to be a big advantage if those horses got much more miles in their legs, are freshened up before the Gold Cup. 10 of the 23 Gold Cup winners this century were in their third or later season chasing. 8 of them have been off the track for at least 2 months. One of the others, Native River, only made his seasonal debut in February. Only the great Corto Star has won in his third season or beyond off a full season and a recent run. Yeah, it'd be great for racing, great for the Dublin Racing Festival if Galopin Des Champs runs in the Gold Cup, the Irish Gold Cup. But this was a slog through the mud, and especially if the ground's testing again in February, it might not do his chances at Cheltenham any good if he does show up there. Even if he doesn't run in the Irish Gold Cup, this was a huge performance in a race he wasn't supposed to be running in. There's a chance it's left his mark. You hear people saying, oh, he's a year older now, more experienced, so he's more able to take a hard race. I'd say the opposite. He's got more miles in his legs and, crucially, a hard run in the Gold Cup. This century, 3 of the 4 previous Gold Cup winners that went on to the Punchestown Gold Cup won it. The fact that Galopin Des Champs didn't makes me wonder whether he's the type that struggles to back up a huge performance a few weeks later. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on, whether his next run's at Leopardstown or at Cheltenham.
Okay, yeah, fascinating to keep an eye on. Matt, we'll stick with you for the Leopardstown 2-mile open chase. Won't spend too long on this because obviously El Fabiola and John Bon, hopefully, fingers crossed in the weather, will be running against each other this weekend. But a little bit on Dino Blue, who was an impressive winner.
Yes, and that's the crucial point. This has been a weak guide to the champion chase. 2 from 37, 67% loss. Last horse to do the double was Moscow Flyer. And that's with Gordon Elliott not strong in the 2-mile chase division in Ireland. Willie Mullins is dominant. Henry's also there. And Willie runs his best horse in the Hilly Way and then bypasses this. So Dino Blue, it's hard to know really what she achieved here. Captain Guinness clinically abnormal. Gentleman to Me needs a run or two, very much a spring horse. And Dysart Dynamo's a proper short finisher and doesn't settle. So she got a bit of a solo, especially with Allegorie de Vassy bombing out. I'd be astonished if Willie didn't aim Dino Blue at the Mayor's Chase rather than the champion. Wouldn't even think about backing her for that. Whether she'll stay the 2-mile 4 furlong, 127 yards at Cheltenham will be a pivotal point in betting in that race. She's a half-sister to Blue Sari, who put up his best performance on RPRs in the 2-mile 4 chase on heavy ground. So maybe she'll stay. I'm open-minded. And for those wanting a bet in the champion chase, this week could be good timing. If John Bon wins the Clarence House or finishes a close second, then it's a case of as we were. Prices of the others be fairly static. They're priced on the basis that both El Fabiolo and John Bon will run. But if El Fabiolo thrashes John Bon, Nicky might well divert John Bon to the Ryanair, in which case the others are going to shorten a lot. So if you fancy one of the long shots, I'd be tempted to back them this week before the Clarence House.
Okay, yeah, Ruby was talking about one angle with maybe backing John Bon for the Ryanair, but that's another angle, Matt. Yeah, maybe look at the long shots if you're looking to eke out a bit of value there. Don, I want to ask you about Gentleman to Me because you've been a fan of this horse. You've got him right a couple of times, particularly at Aintree, either last season or season before. I saw a bit of money coming from him on the day, and I remember thinking, this is surely the wrong time of year, wrong ground, but I was still intrigued at how he would get on. So maybe he's one for the spring to perhaps mark up.
Yeah, I thought he ran really well, Daniel. He got out in front, as that's the way he runs. He goes out in front and it's catch if you can, a lot like Dysart Dynamo. But yeah, like on his first run last season, I know he unseated in the end, but he was well beaten in the Popular Square Chase behind Jeremy's Flame. And he did unseat. It took him a few runs to get going. He went to the Tingle Creek Chase last season as well, and then went on to this race this season. He's made his debut here. He was very good in the Dublin Chase at the Dublin Racing Festival last season. Danny Mullins rode him that day, and again just allowed him bowl along in front on better ground and yielding ground. And I'm not certain he's a Cheltenham horse as such. Like, he kind of, this is his style of racing. You think it's at its most potent on a flat track where he can get into his rhythm and get jumping, like at Aintree, like at Leopardstown. Cheltenham up and down hills, I'm not certain. That said, I did think that he was going to be a player in the Champion Chase last season before he was scratched, I think about a week out. But yeah, again this season he's probably building up to that. So thought he ran well for his first run back. And on Dino Blue, yeah, I'm with Matt on her. I think the Champion Chase, given who's in it and given the way the Mayor's race is quite a winnable race now, I'd say the Mayor's race is the race for. And this race, it was about 3 seconds slower than Marine Nationale was in winning his beginner's chase. Now look, Marine Nationale, he's a potential superstar, we know that, but he could have gone faster. He wasn't given a hard time by Michael O'Sullivan, and he was still 3 seconds faster than Dino Blue, and it wasn't a falsely run race, Dino Blue's race, because, Gentleman de May got out and did his thing. So yeah, I think Dino Blue, I'm not sure she's the alternative for a champion chase bet that people are looking for. And yeah, again, the step up to 2.5 for the Mares Chase, we're not certain. She, as Matt said, she's half to Blue Saris from the family of Royal Eau Claire as well, a Grand National horse. So I think there's every chance she'll get 2.5 miles all right if she settles, and she is settling a wee bit better now.
Okay, yeah, we'll move on to the Jack de Bromhead Christmas Hurdle. Matt, bring a trend in and I'll bring Donn in here.
The trend is that since this became a Grade 1 in 2013, runners are 6 from 40 at the festival, 76 point, 190% profit. Previously this century, they were 0 from 32. And it's one of those races that's changed out of all recognition, as the staying hurdles division in Ireland has. Till relatively recently, Britain dominated the stayers hurdle. Far more of the best horses were trained in Britain earlier in the century, and any good staying prospect in Ireland went over fences. This race has produced the last 3 stayers hurdle winners, though the last 2 were beaten at Leopardstown. Also produced a couple of handicap winners, Commander of Fleet of 51.0 in the Coral Cup, Early Doors 6.0 in the Martin Pipe, from just 7 runners in handicaps in the last decade. So I think this will continue the recent trend of being a strong guide to the festival.
Okay, yeah, Donn, a little bit in the bigger picture, just because I was at track here, the Christmas Hurdle preceded the Irish Gold Cup or the Savills Chase. It was as good as 2 races, really. You're going to get back-to-back in fairness, and the atmosphere on track was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, no, it was great. It's a great day's racing. That, like, you know, all 4 are great days over Christmas. But if you had to pick one, this would probably be the day you'd pick. And yeah, look, going into the race, I was against Irish Point. I wasn't certain that he would stay. Like, he's got such pace over 2 miles, and he's very good over 2.5. But he wasn't proven over 3 miles. And I don't think his stamina was tested as much as it could have been. Like, the time of the race wasn't great. It was actually slower than the time that Gay Cool clocked in the Pretemps qualifier later on. That said, the winner's finishing percentage was 108% or thereabouts. So whereas Gay Cool, that race was very efficiently run, the winner's finishing speed was about 100%. So you can it's not Irish Point's fault, because the sedate early pace suited him really well, but you had to be taken by the performance that he put up. The visual impression that he created was really strong. He's a top class horse. He's I think a triple Grade 1 winner now, including over 3 miles. Just not certain that a really strongly run stayers hurdle will be the thing for him. And obviously, the Rob Kerr and Gordon Elliott, they've got Ante-Post, and he's going there, so he's their number 1 stayers hurdle horse, and that makes sense. Irish Point, you could see him maybe being an entry hurdle horse. You can see them running him in the stairs, because again, we're not certain that he doesn't stay still. And I guess after that performance, you'd say he's more likely than not to see out the stairs hurdle trip, even a strongly run race. But I think that will be another step a little bit into the unknown in terms of his stamina. But he's a lovely horse. He's only just turned 6. He's a young horse. He's still improving. And yeah, like, it wouldn't be at all surprising to see him run a big race in the stairs hurdle. That said, I still think that Ante-Post is their number 1. Okay,
Donn, before I go to Matt, just a little bit on the finishing speed, and explain that to the listeners and viewers in terms of how you use it. If it's above 100%, it generally shows it's generally positive for a horse.
Yeah, look, it's great now we have sections for the Irish race meetings. And so Irish Point's finishing speed for the last 4 furlongs, it's a percentage of his overall speed for the race, and it's 108.59%. So that tells you that it was a slowly run race, because he was able to quicken through the final part of the race. And that, by contrast, Gay Cool's our finishing percentage was 100.35%, so almost bang on 100%. Now, different race courses have different end of race par times, but around about 100% tells you that it was probably a very efficiently run race. And look, it was for all the horses in it, but it's when you're comparing one race to another race, and you initially see Irish Point was slower. So he was 6 minutes 28. Gay Cool was 6 minutes 25. He was 3 seconds slower than her. But for the last 4 furlongs, she was 65 seconds. He was 61.28 seconds. So he was 4 seconds faster than her through the final 4 furlongs. So it's a big contrast in the way that the race was run. So basically, the Irish Point race was fairly sedately run early on and allowed him quicken. Whereas Gay Cool's race, that race was run at a fairly efficient pace throughout.
Yeah, gives that context to that overall number, as Donn touched on. Matt, Irish Point.
Yeah, very impressed with him. Echo everything Donn said. The fact that he settled so well off this dawdle really bodes well for his future career as a staying hurdler. So important to settle at that sort of pace when you've been running over shorter. I'm pretty surprised there's talk of not running him in the Stayers Hurdle. It's not as if Tiahupu's odds on and an absolute banker. Why wouldn't you fire a couple of bullets at it? So I think he's got a good chance. Home by the Lee, he's not one to trust, but if he's on a going day, he could run well at long odds in the Stayers Hurdle, especially if there's a strong pace for him to chase. Didn't like being out on his own. He's one for in-running players on the Matchbook Exchange. You'll know what sort of mood he's in early on.
Okay, yeah, and that's before you even add Bob Ollinger to the mix, who looks likely to be going to the Aintree Hurdle, although there's a lot of people are tipping him up for champion, the Stayers, so who knows, but they seem definite that he'll be going to the Aintree Hurdle. We'll move on to the Long Walk Hurdle. Matt, hit us with the trend and then your take on the race here.
So overall, this has been a solid trial. Very much been a case of needing to win this to win the Stayers Hurdle. 7 of the 8 Stayers Hurdle winners that ran the Long Walk won it. The other was narrowly beaten under a comedy ride. The Long Walk is like a lot of the open grade ones in the first half of the season, in that it's tough for second season hurdlers just out of novice company. If they can beat the season campaigners as early in the season as this, it's often the sign of a top class horse that will be competitive in the championship races at the festival. So rather than look at the overall Long Walk record, the trend is that 5 second season hurdlers have won the Long Walk this century when there's been a Stayers Hurdle that season. They finished 1, 2, 1, 5, 1 in it. Served up a thrilling finish. The new kid on the block, Crambo, just prevailing from the hugely lovable veteran Paisley Park. And despite unseasonably good ground, the pace was sedate. All 10 were bunched coming into the straight shortly after they got racing, therefore placed more emphasis on being able to quicken off that steady tempo than keep galloping, rather than the sort of true staying test we got in last year's staying hurdle, and a bit like the Jack de Bromhead race that Don's just described. Yeah, back in the day, I'd have said this was perfect preparation for Cheltenham. These days, there's a better chance of a truly run Stayers, especially if Flooring Porter reverts to hurdles. So not easy to assess exactly what level Crambo is at. And Noel Feely said he could well go straight to the Stayers. So we may not get any more clues. But despite a very strong Irish challenge, to win the Long Walk as a second season hurdler is usually the sign of a really good horse. He does look a contender. For me, it's not a betting race at the moment because I want to see what happens with Impere Passe and the Irish champion. So once I've seen that, then I'll probably take more of a view on the race.
Yeah, Don, the Stayers is shaping up to be quite a decent race. It's always an open race, but to me this year there seems to be more contenders, and it just seems to be a better. It's a tough one to word, but I'm excited for the Stayers this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's got stronger since the start of the season. At the start of the season, I was looking at the race going, that's a very winnable race. If you had a horse at all, it could. I was kind of looking for a chaser who might drop back down over hurdles and go and try and win it. But now you've got obviously Thalem, the French horse. You've got Tiahupu, who looks very, very strong now, Irish point, as Matt said. And then Impere Passe, if he were to go for it. Flooring Porter, he was a chaser at the start of the season. Now talking about maybe him dropping back down, going back over hurdles. So Gerhard, they're talking about maybe him taking in the Stayers Hurdle. And then you've got all the others who are around and about, the Dasher Drasses and Paisley Parks, first and second in the long distance hurdle. So yeah, it's shaping up to be a far more interesting race than it was for me anyway at the start of the season. And Crambo, yeah, he's really interesting. Like of all of Matt's trends, and there are some very interesting ones in there, this was the one that grabbed me most this week. Second season hurdlers have won 3 out of 5 when they've won this and gone on to the Stayers Hurdle. So that to me is very strong. And Crambo, like you couldn't not be impressed with him. He was unlucky in the handicap at Haydock. I think his owner said before that race he was a Stayers Hurdle horse, and he proved it in the Long Walk Hurdle. He beat Dashel Drasher and Paisley Park, and he had to dig deep to get the better of Paisley Park on the far side. It was, great to see those. They're 11 and 12 now, running such big races. But he's improving. That was only his 8th run over hurdles, and he was unlucky in the Haydock race. We know that now for sure because of the performance that he put up in the Long Walk Hurdle, as well as the visual impression that he created that day. And yeah, like he's a coming horse, isn't he? He's a horse that's going to step forward again, probably from this. And yeah, it's good to see Fergal O'Brien with a contender for the Stayers Hurdle, and you couldn't rule him out.
Yeah, great story there as well. We talked about stories, but having Fergal O'Brien with a chance at Cheltenham Festival, it can only be a good thing for a race. And we're done there for the Christmas review. That was a lot of stuff there thrown at you. Feel free to take a break if you want, pause the podcast, come back to it. We're moving on to the weekend review. So Don, take it away in the Sylviano Conti, and then you can give your trend and then your thoughts on the race. But obviously, it was obvious before the race Banbridge was going to win this, so I presume you backed him for the Ryanair.
For me, yeah.
No, Matt. No, this is for Matt. Sorry, Matt.
This is a problem in talking beforehand about what you've done. Yes, I was toing and froing about backing him in the Ryanair. He was about 26.0, bottled it, and of course he's bolted up in. He's now about 6.0. So the trend here is that runners are 0 from 11 at the festival. 3 winners finishing 8p4 in the Ryanair. This is another of the conditions races to be added to the pattern in recent years. Hasn't justified its place up until now. Only runners who have reached a place at the festival was God's Own, who was a distant third in the Champion Chase. But this looked a much stronger renewal. Produced a taking winner in Banbridge, one of the top novices last season at this sort of trip. On his seasonal debut, overcame a couple of untidy jumps in the straight to outpoint a good yardstick. 162 rated Pic D'Or. He was conceding him £3, especially as Banbridge gave the impression to me he'd be slightly better going left-handed. So a big question was, how fit was he? He'd been ready to race for some weeks. He hadn't run because of the testing ground. So perhaps he was pretty straight. Beforehand, Joseph was talking about this being a good starting point with the spring festivals in mind. Perhaps he was playing down expectations. I'm open-minded. Even if he was pretty fit here, it puts him right in the Ryanair mix. If he's going to come on significantly for the run, then he's going to have a great chance in theory. But the issue is the ground. Last year, he scratched from the turners on the day on the ground. That was a mixture of good to soft and soft, officially the latter. And 6.0 would look good for what doesn't look a great Ryanair if you be confident getting decent ground. That's no longer the case at the festival. Ronnie Bartley said afterwards, if they don't get a sound surface, he's more likely to go for the Melling Chase. So for me, having missed the fancy prices, it's a watching brief for now. Pic D'Or, really solid yardstick, 4 from 5 last season, only beaten by Shishkin on a going day. He didn't deserve to make that slight error at the last because he jumped so well. In truth, I think Banbridge was coming to win the race anyway. Unsurprisingly, he's going the Ascot Chase, Melling Chase route, bypassing Cheltenham. And Edwardstone was too keen after 14 chase starts, all at around the minimum trip. No chance of getting home, and it's back to the drawing board with him. The Ryanair really favours front runners, so perhaps they'll run him in that, let him go his own gallop and see if he stays. He's always been a hold-up horse, but just as they've done with Trip, I think it's time to try something different tactically, because he's going to be a hard horse to place otherwise.
Yeah, you fear they might have left it too late to move Edwardstone up in triple. Who knows? Maybe a change of riding tactics at Ryanair. That's actually very interesting. Banbridge, Don, became the first Irish train winner ever, the Sylviano Conti. And it's sort of, it goes with the trend. You've seen Gavin Cromwell target a lot of Cheltenham meetings. It feels a lot of the Irish trainers outside the big three are looking elsewhere for their horses.
Yeah, no, it's there are more Irish runners, I'd say, outside of the Cheltenham Festival these days, well, including at the Cheltenham Festival these days, than there ever have been, I'd say. But no, a good spot by Joseph O'Brien. And Banbridge, yeah, look, he's a horse that I've been a fan of his for quite some time. It's hard not to be a fan of his. I thought he did well to win. What defined his performances last season was his jumping. He was very, very accurate, very fluent over his fences. I thought his jumping was not just as good as it can be on Saturday. I thought he did well to win, and Pic D'Or did make that mistake at the last, but I think he probably needed to jump it well, and Banbridge needed to jump it poorly for Pic D'Or to put himself back in with a chance of winning. So yeah, I thought Banbridge was going better on the run to the last, but no, it's a nice performance, and they started him off early last season. He won his beginner's chase at Goran Park in early October last season. This year, it's a later comeback for him. Maybe with the view to going to the Spring Festival as a fresher horse, because last year he didn't run in the end. He was kind of, I thought he was a Brown Advisory Chase horse initially. A Martin Pipe winner who won his beginner's chase over 2.5 miles, but he showed pace then to win the Arkle trial at Cheltenham's November meeting. Then he had the Arkle or the Turners as options, and then the Grand Turn, so he didn't go for either. But no, he's a really interesting horse, and he is a Cheltenham Festival winner. Like, he won that Martin Pipe hurdle when he stayed on really well at the end of the extended 2.5 miles to win it. And the Martin Pipe hurdle, they generally don't tend to come back and trip after winning a Martin Pipe. They either generally stay around 2.5, or it's for me, it's a stairs race. You need to get further than 2.5 miles to be able to win a Martin Pipe. So Banbridge, he shows a lot of pace. I think he's got faster over fences because his jumping is so good. So the 2.5 mile trip looks good for him. And yeah, like he's got a lot of he's got a lot of the things you look for in a potential Ryanair horse. Pic D'Or, as Matt said, he's very good. He's very good at Kempton as well. So to beat him at Kempton, albeit getting £3, it was a good performance. So yeah, on goodish ground or thereabouts, yeah, you'd have to have Banbridge in your list.
exciting, but even if he does miss the Cheltenham Festival, a very exciting horse for Aintree. And look, it's great. Not all horses are targeting Cheltenham throughout the season. Bob Ollinger being another one there that we spoke about. The Lawlors of Naas was rearranged. Don, we'll stick with you and I'll bring Matt's trend in a sec. It's more to do with the Ballymore, but Mullins' fourth string, essentially, at least by SP, ends up winning the race. It reminds me a small bit maybe this is a bad example, but when Al Fabiola was like third or fourth string in the Irish Arkle, I think people sort of dismissed it because Daryl Jacob, almost forgetting the Simon Near connection, and this could have, in Mullins' eyes anyway, been his second string, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I think if Paul Townend isn't riding Simon Near Isaac Swade horse, trained by Willie Mullins, Daryl Jacob rides him, and that seems to be the way it is. I think Paul Townend rode Appreciated in that race last year that Al Fabiola won. And reading Tommy Wrong, like, these novice hurdles, even the graded novice hurdles, you don't have a huge amount of evidence to go on. Like reading Tommy Wrong he'd only won his maiden hurdle before the race. Now, okay, he only got home by a short head from Lisnagar Fortune, who won there yesterday as well, actually, enhanced the form further. And Il Atlantique and Firefox, they were really high-profile horses. Il Atlantique, he only won his maiden hurdle at Gorham Park. Firefox he'd had a couple of runs over hurdles. He beat Ballyburn, and that form was enhanced. So you can see why they were popular and fashionable. But as was the case with the Caldwell Potter race at Leopardstown over Christmas, they put the top two in quite short. And you can often argue, like, this is very easy in hindsight, but you can argue that the disparity between the top ones who are fashionable and who are undoubtedly impressive winning their maiden hurdles, maybe they shouldn't be so far clear of the others because of there's so many unknowns. Like we just don't know how much horses are going to progress from one race to the next. And that was obviously the case with Reading Tommy Wrong. The step up and trip suited him. Thought Daryl Jacob was very good on him. He allowed them at it up front. And look, again, Il Atlantique did everything right. Paul Townend couldn't have done much more on him. And in the end, he's just got worn down and run down. But even over the last, like, Il Atlantique was finding plenty in front. But Reading Tommy Wrong, he wore him down for me. And it was interesting that Daryl Jacob on Racing TV directly afterwards, he said that he feels more like a staying horse, like he could, maybe go out and trip, was the kind of sense that I got from what Daryl said. And then Willie Mullins was saying kind of 2.5 miles Ballymore type, or whatever it's called now. It's not the Ballymore this year anymore. The 2.5 mile race at the Cheltenham Festival, and like he's got lots of stamina in his pedigree. He's I think his dam's a half sister to Cazal. If you remember, Cazal was a really good staying hurdler of Owen Griffin's. I think finished third in the Stairs hurdle, and Keith de la Rock is in his pedigree as well. So lots of stamina in his pedigree, and yeah, I kind of nearly, and especially given the strength with which he came up the hill at Naas, I would have thought that he definitely wouldn't be disadvantaged by going out and trip from 2.5 miles.
Okay, yeah, Matt, give us your trend, and then it's focused on the Ballymore in this race specifically. But yeah, as Don said, it is easy hindsight, but it was my initial reaction going, that horse was way too big. But again, it wasn't my reaction before the race, so that's more on me, I think.
Yeah, well, McKinley did it, a similar situation. I think he was 34.0 the first year. This was a grade 1. He was about third or fourth string of Willies. So 9 winners have run in the Ballymore, 3 winning, 5 of the 6 losers have been placed. We've talked before about the typically steady tempo of the Ballymore, consequent importance of good 2-mile hurdling form. The only 2 trials at intermediate trips that have been a decent guide, this and the Navan Novice Hurdle, which at different times have been the grade 1 at this trip in Ireland over the winter. That's a reflection of how strong a contest this tends to be. Not generally missed by the market. 3 horses that did the double in the Ballymore went off 3.5, 1.57 and 2.5. Looked a really good quality renewal. I totally called it wrong. I thought Firefox had a great chance here. Thought Reading Tommy Wrong was probably value for a bit more than the winning margin, because he didn't jump well in the early part of the race, had to be hunted round, warmed to his task. And I think Daryl Jacob said, and understandably, thought he was going to win quite easily at the last, and then really had to battle. It's interesting, Willie was quite bullish in his column, saying he was a dark horse of the race. So perhaps it wasn't as big a surprise at Clesutton as the SP would suggest. But the comment that Daryl made afterwards that Don mentioned about him being a stayer and probably riding like a 3-miler, those sort of horses very rarely win the Ballymore. So about 9.0 doesn't appeal. Also want to mention Lecky Watson. Again, he was too keen, obviously, at his hurdles. He's another who looks an embryonic 3-miler. Doesn't seem to be learning from race to race at the moment. He's running out of time to grow up enough for the Albert Bartlett, but he's one to keep an eye on, because if the penny drops, he could be a Grade 1 stayer.
Yeah, Willie said for Lecky Watson, he's going to run him as many times as possible till he learns. So it'll be interesting how many races they'll get in between now and the Albert Bartlett. Matt, take it away in the Hampton. My favorite race to watch, just because it's a grey dawning, was so exciting to watch. It may not be the best trial for the festival, but on its own, it's a fantastic race and a fantastic horse.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not been a good trial at all. Winners have finished 4.8065 in the Broadway. Overall runners are 2 from 37 at the festival. But a bit like the Sylviano Conti, this looked a much stronger renewal this year. And they looked to go a fast gallop. Patrick Hodges determined to try and burn them off one by one, asking Appleway up at virtually every fence. That worked in seeing off Broadway Boy, but left the mare a sitting duck for Grey Dawning. And the winner avoided the sort of blunder that had marked his previous starts, costing victory at Cheltenham last time. Did run down the last two, but the race was won by then. Looked to finish with running left off a good gallop, very much in the manner of a classy 3-miler. And he looks up with the best of the British stayers in the strong division this year. In principle, 13.0 for the Broadway looks attractive, despite concerns about how his jumping would hold up. Afterwards, Dan's assistant Tom Messenger said they may go for the Scilly Isles and then see whether they go for Cheltenham. That sounds a bit like Dan's mentor Paul Nicholls. It's increasingly targeted the domestic graded novice chases over the winter, bypassed Cheltenham for Aintree or Ayr with a career as an open company in mind. He's a cracking prospect and he really looks to have an engine. I'll be holding fire about Cheltenham at this stage. Appleway looks an out-and-out stayer. Best way to tire out such a horse to go too quickly, which is what looked to happen here. If she goes to Cheltenham, the National Hunt Chase looks her race. And back at a more controlled gallop, she shouldn't be underestimated in that. But I suspect Connections still fancy a crack at the Broadway. If you did know she was going for the National Hunt Chase, 26.0 would look a big price. And Broadway Boy, he eyeballed Appleway for the first 10 furlongs till Sam Twiston-Davies sensed they were cutting each other's throats. He'd made all or most for his 3 chase wins, so maybe he's much better when he's dominating. He's drifted at 41.0 for the Broadway. If you forgive him this, then that's a big price, especially if when we have an idea of what's going to run, it looks like he might get an uncontested lead. Don't write him off.
Yeah, Don, what were your thoughts on the race? And is it just me, or does it feel that there's at least better novice? I know there was not many runners in this race, but maybe better English novice chasers this year?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting race, Dan. I thought it was set up for Grey Dawning. Like Appleway, if she goes forward, Broadway Boy, as Matt said, likes to go forward. And there was no real let up. Both riders wanted to lead, and they went very, very, even watching the race live, you were kind of looking at Grey Dawning in behind, thinking Harry Skelton's going to be laughing here in behind, because they just set it up for him. And look, he's very good, and I think Matt put him up as an eye catcher 2 runs ago. He was unlucky not to win at Cheltenham last time. He made a really bad mistake at the second last fence and was still only beaten 3 parts of a length by Genius Destiny. It was a really good run, but he made amends here. And look, you could see what was happening through the race. They were going fast. He was traveling well. He jumped well. He coasted in behind, and then Appleway she was just tired. Broadway Boy, I fully agree with Matt's sentiment on him. I think you can just put a line through this race, and if you're getting a bonus of a bigger price about him for Cheltenham, then that's just bonus territory, because I just think you can forget this race. Although I'm not sure that the class to win a Broadway, I think maybe the National Hunt Chase, if they're so inclined, might be a better race for him. He could get into a rhythm out in front a little bit more easily. And he was impressive the last day at Cheltenham at the December meeting when he made those 2 mistakes down the back straight. And you thought, an inexperienced horse, that's going to knock him. He's lost all his momentum. He's gone. But he got back into his rhythm and he stayed on really well to beat 300 under through 5, a good yardstick as well. So Broadway Boy, I'd keep him in mind. Grey Dawning, I don't know about you or Matt, but I always thought he's more 2.5 than 3 miles. He's got that kind of pace and that jumping ability that's going to be effective over 2.5. I'd say the Scilly Isles Chase could suit him really, really well over those fences at Sandown over an extended 2.5 miles. And like he did run well at Cheltenham at the December meeting, so like Cheltenham is a track that he can handle all right. But for that second last, he probably would have won. So. And again, he's lightly raced. I think he's going to be a factor wherever he's going. But the Scilly Isles Chase, to me, that's going to be a really interesting next step for him.
Okay, we'll move on to the final race we're covering in full, the Moscow Flyer. Matt, bring your trend in, and I'll let Donn take it away first on this race.
The trend is that 13 winners have run at the festival, winning 2 Supremes and 2 Ballymores. It's been one of those races where the winner regularly turns out to be a top-class novice, but the race itself lacks depth. We've mentioned in previous episodes they tend to go steadily in the Ballymore, so Grade 1 2-mile form has been a great guide. It's not just the Grade 1 form. 2 winners of this to have lined up in the Ballymore, Mikhail Dagonet and Impere Pass, have both won. 10 winners to run the Supreme, include Duvan and Ventura did the double, Min, Trifolium, Kicking King were all placed. By contrast, the lack of depth has meant that all 24 horses beaten in the Moscow Flyer that lined up in the festival were all beaten again. So it probably pays to focus on the winner here.
Okay, pays to focus on the winner, perhaps, Donn. Just at the market before the race, there was money nearly for everything bar the favourite, who ended up going off odds against. But what a performance from Mystical Power.
Yeah, it's very easy to focus on the winner here. He was really good. Like you could see him quickening up. He visually quickened. And look, this was his first run since the Galway Festival. He was in the original Lawlors of Naas race. I think he was the only
and there was a gamble, wasn't there, on him as well?
Yeah, he was pretty well backed in the morning. I think he was the only defection from the race from the Sunday to the Friday. And like, it would have been really interesting to see if he'd run in it, how he would have fared. I know it's over a half a mile further, but he was so good. He showed all that pace. And you'd think by Galileo out of any power, you'd think 2 miles would be on the sharp side for him, but he showed real pace yesterday. He travelled really well. And Jagoro, the runner-up, like he's a nicely progressive horse. He beat a well-regarded horse of Tom Cooper's last time at Navan, Butcher Hollow, and he beat him well. He finished second behind Flamborough at Cork the time before that. Flamborough won at Cork there last weekend. So all that form, Jagoro's form, was working out well. And James's Gate, who was third, and he was really well beaten. He attracted a few heads when he ran in that maiden herd at Leopardstown over Christmas. He's joined Martin Brazel from Willie Mullins. He was a well-regarded bumper horse as well when he was at Willie Mullins. He finished third in the champion bumper. So it's good solid form. And look, Mystical Power, he's high profile before he ever set foot on a race course given his breeding, but he's starting to live up to it now. And look, it wasn't surprising to see them put him in as favourite for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. Although his owner and trainer both have other horses for that, so it's going to be interesting to see how he goes. You could easily see him stepping out and trip for the Ballymore as well, and he has that turn of foot that can be a potent weapon in the Ballymore. But look, he's just a really exciting horse wherever he goes.
So Matt, here's where I'm at with him. He didn't travel well at times during the race, at least visually. And a lot of people say a strongly run 2 miles will suit him. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, if it's really strongly run in a big field and you're not traveling, sometimes you can get caught up in the hustle and bustle and you end up nowhere in the Supreme. So it's one of them where I can see the Supreme really suiting him on one hand, and then for the exact same reasons, I can feel it not suiting him. So I'm just trying to figure out where you're at with Mystical Power.
Well, you've explained it very well because it is confusing. And he was a bit novice-y early on as well. You can get yourself out of your ground in the Supreme, particularly if you get a decent field there. JP McManus has got Jericho de Repenay, Dream to Share, Mirazol West, No Flies and Him, and Down Memory Lane all in the mix as well. Now, he generally prioritises the Supreme over the Ballymore. Jet Ski and My Tent or Yours ran against each other. He didn't have a runner in the Ballymore. He's not one of those owners whose ego wants to have a runner in every Grade 1. But even so, as Don said, you've got to imagine some of these are going to run in the Ballymore. And the fact that the turn of foot he showed, as Don said, that might really suit that race. What I definitely wouldn't be doing is getting sucked into this, he's Annie Power's son, so he'll go offshore to back him now for the Supreme theory that's doing the rounds. Yeah, he could be a bigger price if a star emerges from the 2 mile Grade 1 at the DRF. And if that star's trained by Willie Mullins, then they could be the A-teamer for the Supreme. Yeah, Willie's won the Supreme 7 times, 5 of which he had more than one runner. The winner was always his first string in the market. Willie's second strings virtually never win Grade 1 novice hurdles or chases at shorter distances at the festival. So Mystical Power could end up the second string in the Supreme, or if he is an A-teamer, he could be in the Ballymore. So my advice would be, if you fancy him, I'd hold fire till after the DRF, until the vibes about running plans are clearer.
It is amazing the more you think about how his first string has always managed to win, and there hasn't been closer with those novice hurdlers. So maybe this could be the year that bucks that trend. Who knows? Don, 3 eye catchers for you here this week. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, again, a long list to choose from. I thought Nemean Lion ran well in the Lanzarote hurdle. He wasn't far off the pace early on. he was towards the inside, and then Lanzarote hurdle, you can often get traffic towards the inside. He was shuffled back around the home turn. He was shuffled back to about 10th, I think, on the crown of the home turn, and then he travelled well into the home straight. He looked like going to the second last. He looked like probably the most likely winner. But then look, JJ Riley picked up well in front, and then the main line made a mistake at the final flight, which kind of probably ended any chance he had of winning it. But I still think there's more to come from him. He's only had 7 runs over hurdles, and he's got form at Cheltenham as well. He didn't run badly in the Greatwood hurdle there at the November meeting when he travelled well into his race and then looked just to get out pace. I thought the step up to 2 miles and 5 suited him well. And yeah, there could be, I think that type of trip is a good trip for him. So there could be more to come from him. Spillane Tower, we mentioned him before. He did so well to beat Blood Destiny and Silent Approach. And there's a sense that maybe the race fell apart a little bit. Blood Destiny did travel like a likely winner into the home straight, and maybe didn't see it out. Maybe didn't see out 2.5 miles because he is a pacey horse, and he did win his beginner's chase over 2.5 miles at Naas, but for whatever reason, to me he seemed to be outstayed by Spillane Tower. And Spillane Tower, I thought, did really well to win over 2 miles the last day to beat Firm Footings. The step up to 2.5, that suited him. And he could be a horse who could step forward again. Like it's a big ask to step into a Turner's, but I'd say if he wouldn't need to improve a whole lot more to see him as that type of horse. And then the third horse is Saint Roi. Just thought his run in the Downmoor Chase was a very good run. He was in behind early on. Uncle Phil and Paul Tanner was superb on him, dictated his own pace, a sedate pace, and quickened. Saint Roi was well back early on. He got hampered as well when Rosie's Hollow fell at the third last fence. So I thought he did well to stay on as well as he did. He's now up to a mark of 153. But he's a classy horse. He's competing in all those Grade 1 races. Maybe a step up and trip will be the thing for him. Like he's been staying on at the end of 2 miles, but his jumping on Saturday was a lot better than it had been throughout the early part of the season. So look, he's 9 years old now, but he's still a relatively likely race 9-year-old over fences. And yeah, I can just see him taking another step forward from this.
Has form, of course, with Banbridge at the end of last season, Don. So yeah, that's a nice link there. So Nemeon Lion, Saint Roi, and Spillane's Tower for Don. And Matt, I'm a sucker for these horses. Like Saint Roi stood out to me in Don's eye catchers, and Nuba Negra stands out to me in yours. So I'm intrigued. Take it away.
Yeah, Nuba Negra is running on a sound surface for the first time since winning a terrible Schloer chase at the start of last season. 3 lengths second of 155 in the new limited handicap version of the Desert Orchid. That was his first handicap chase. He was behind, and Harry Skelton looked to have accepted the situation after 3 out, but then sensed there was a pace collapse. Editor de Gite and Elixir de Nuts were stopping, having been 15 lengths ahead of par shortly before halfway. Finishing speed was only 92.5. And Nuba Negra was a fast finishing 3 lengths behind Editor de Gite at the line. Had he been asked for his effort early, might have got there. Had the race been run the day before on genuinely good ground, rather than the good to soft here after the rain came, he might have won. And that was from a horse having his 3rd run in little over 5 weeks. Has always been miles better fresh. He's been left on 155, 13 pounds below his peak mark. If he's freshened up for the spring now, then he could be a big player in the Grand Annual, or especially the Red Rum, if he gets his ground. Second one's Am I Right? Inevitably few eye catchers in the 3 mile handicap chase on the second day of the Leopardstown Christmas meeting. Am I Right likes a sound surface, inconvenience when it bucketed down, turning the ground soft. Still ran a good race, staying on to be 11.25 lengths 5th of 138, sporting a first-time tongue tie. He looks made for a big staying handicap in the spring. And having been beaten off a British mark of 142 when getting a sighter for Cheltenham in October, should be eligible for the Kim Muir. Although Henry doesn't run many in bumpers, so doesn't have day-to-day associations with top amateurs. Secured Ben Harvey for 8 and had a shame a couple of years ago. Barry O'Neill on plan of attack in the Kim Muir. So confident he can get a good jockey. Am I Right? Shapes like that test would suit him. So if he gets a sound surface, he'd look a leading player if he's still off that British mark of 142. And finally, Gutapan Collonge, who was 3rd in the classic handicap chase at Warwick. His form in marathons now reads F4433. And since the start of 2022, his form over shorter reads 11111. And the two who finished in front of him were both making their marathon debuts. They'd obviously been handicapped on form over much shorter, neither run over further than an extended 3-1. If, as is often the case, they improved a lot for the step up in trip, then form could be strong. Getaban Collonges was off 136. That would have got him into every recent Kinmure, all bar one of the recent Ultimas. So he's one for the notebook for both of those races. Being owned by JP McManus potentially has the huge advantage of Derek O'Connor if he goes to the Kinmure. And runners from the classic handicap chase are 5 from 31 this century in the Ultram and Kinmure, 17.55% profit. Punters tend to look at horses that have been running in marathons and dismiss them as being too slow for the Ultima and Kinmure. But the Ultima is the first race of the meeting for many of the jockeys, often go too quickly, becomes a real test of stamina at the trip. And with the doling out, the Kinmure is often run over slightly further than the Gold Cup. Both suit thorough stayers. Horses that have run in the best marathons like this tend to get under bet. And those 5 winners I've mentioned finished 4P344 at Warwick.
Okay, those 3 eye catchers, Gutampan, Collage, Am I Right, and Nuba Negra. Matt, just one quick word on Calixios, the Mr. Policeman Bubba Burst, but an impressive winner. Good to see him back in form.
Yes, Mr. Policeman has really been a heck of a morning glory, hasn't he? He was potentially bagged at that by Willie Mullins saying he hasn't showed me on the course what he's shown at home. So I think he's one to avoid now. The 2 that fought out the finish, Quilixios and Safiura, both jumped well, especially the winner. Quilixios had looked promising at Limerick, probably didn't stay 3 miles in the Florida Pearl. His jumping ought to stand him in good stead. I'm not sure he'd have the pace for an Arkle. Hunter's Yarn was beating Safiura much more easily when coming down. I'd have thought the Turners was Quilixios' race. Henry's going down the Arkle route, as he tends to do. Safiura is interesting. He was a big gamble from 17.0 in the price-wise grid into 7.5 favouritism for the Coral Cup last year. I suspect he's been primed for a handicap chase. He was going on again at the finish. Did lose a little bit of momentum going through the top of 2 out, but I think it was his stamina kicking in. And looking at Cheltenham, 4 of the last 7 winners of the plate have been novices, 3 first-season novices. And at the last 6 festivals, there have been 8 winners of the 4 remaining handicap chases that were in their first season over fences. Gordon trained 4 of those 8. So Safiura has one for the notebook for when the festival handicap entries come out next month.
Okay, before when to pull the trigger, Don, a quick line on Hunter's Yarn.
Yeah, like he was very good. He nearly came down at the second last, like he came down at the last on his first run, but it was good to see him getting it done. Pat Theroux probably didn't jump that well. He's the horse who was kind of hampered and fell at the final fence in the race that the Folks Tiara won at Leopardstown over Christmas. So it was a good performance by Hunter's Yarn. And when that time the Matt was talking, the race that Matt was talking about there, the beginner's chase at Fairy House, in which he fell, in which he handed the races to Safarur. That's interesting because it's a race that the Willie Mullins, Simon Munir, Isaac Suede combination, they won it with Blue Lord in 2021. He went on, ran well in the Arkle. He won it with Alfa Biolo last year, and he went on, obviously won the Arkle and everything else besides. So it's an interesting that they ran Hunter's Yarn in that race. He does have a little bit to improve. Like he's got a hurdles rating of 142, and he was kind of just below the top Willie Mullins novice hurdlers last season. He ran in the county hurdle instead of in one of the novice hurdles. That was after winning well at at Navan, beating Imagine in that race, and he didn't perform in the county hurdle. So that's just a wee bit in the back of your mind if you're thinking about him going back to Cheltenham. But that said, bar the second last, he couldn't really have done much more than he did at Ferry House. Good to see him getting his win on the board. And yeah, you have to include. I think you have to include him in the Arkle picture.
Okay, when to pull the trigger, Matt, on the mare's hurdles. Give us your thought process here and why this horse is worth backing right now.
Yeah, a few weeks ago we talked about what information I wanted to pull the trigger on a mare's hurdle bet, and I was focusing on the 2 last season's juveniles, Lossiemouth and Gala Marceau. My default position is to be against the previous season's juveniles in graded conditions races, especially grade 1s. As the mare's hurdle strengthened, the 5-year-olds found it tougher and tougher. 1 from 17 in the last 14 renewals, only the brilliant Apples Jades won. And in the last 3 renewals, no 5-year-olds even run. Yet the Ante-Post market still has those 2 at the front of it. They've not run yet. They're apparently fine, in full training. They had mooted returns over Christmas. Lossiemouth was entered for the Rail Kill, not declared, but neither have run. Until recently, Willie Mullins was nowhere near as strong in juvenile hurdles as novice hurdles. Other than burning Victory's lucky success when Goshen came down, Willie had only won the Triumph once with Scalardi until Vauban and Lossiemouth took the last 2 editions. And Willie thought Vauban was much better than a typical Triumph winner. I wonder if seeing him comfortably seen off in 4 open Grade 1 hurdles last season has made Willie change his training method. Apparently, Lossiemouth and Garlamoso haven't had any issues, just wanted to give them time. And even by modern standards, running 5 times between December and April, May wasn't that hard a season. In the autumn, I was open-minded whether this meant they'd have the autumn off, not that unusual for Willies, begin at Christmas, have a couple of runs before being peaked for Cheltenham. Both in the Irish Champion Hurdle, races like the Yorkshire Rose in a couple of weeks' time at Doncaster have been mooted. If that's where they're going, knowing Willie, that probably means only 1 run before Cheltenham. So I wonder if he's decided that they're going to struggle this season, but could flourish next season. Both Punjabi and Binocular were Grade 1 winning juveniles, beaten in the Champion Hurdle at 5, won it at 6. And I wonder if they might be soft-trained this spring. I'm speculating. But they do take a big chunk out of the market. It was enough for me to pull the trigger on a bet on You Wear It Well. Consensus after she won the Dawn Run that Magical Zoe and Hauke de Taber have been given too much to do. But horses ridden up with the pace had a terrible record in the Dawn Run. And You Wear It Well made all to win unchallenged. I think she was much the best on the day. Showed her well-being by making all and beating Lucia over 2 miles at Wetherby. That form's obviously been franked. And I forgive her only being 3rd in the Fighting Fifth. That was on dreadful ground. Fortunately, she'd had a run and was fit before that slog. It wasn't an ideal seasonal debut for Love Envoy. And whilst the Dawn Run hasn't yet produced the winner of the following year's Mayor's Hurdle, the winners have been building up a solid record. 4 of the 7 have lined up. Love Envoy and Concertista finished 2nd, Limini 3rd. Tell Me Something Girl going as well as anything when brought down 2 out. I trust Jamie Snowden to have a peaked for March. 21.0 looks the wrong price in a wide open renewal of the Mayor's Hurdle, especially if I'm right about the 2 5-year-olds. So I pulled the trigger on a bet on You Wear It Well.
Okay, yeah, Don, very interesting on the top 2 in the market there. I have to say, interesting theory anyway. And you were trying to guess Matt's Mayor's Hurdle, so you were between the 2.
I had it down to 2, yeah. You Wear It Well and Love Envoy. No, I fully agree with his assessment of the Willie Mullins horses. Like, it is hard for 5-year-olds. You know, we know the Champion Hurdle. You've got the Gavin Cromwell horse who won it and Catch It. I think they're the only 2 5-year-olds in See You Then.
Yeah.
So it's hard, and it's, you know, as the quality of the race gets better, it's harder for 5-year-olds. And I'd say Matt is reading, who knows how to read Willie Mullins, but I'd say he's reading it very well, because in his interviews he has said about his two mares, the 2 4-year-olds from last season, that he is going to take it handy. I think Ruby was saying there last week that they're both in full training, so they're both well and nothing wrong with them. And just, you can see his thinking though. You can see, you know, like Willie Mullins, he's always tweaking things, always changing, and use every piece of evidence that you have in order to try and better yourself and do even better. And that seems to be the way, that seems to be why we haven't seen either of them since then. Because Scarlett Marceau, she won that race in France during the summer, so she's been off for not as long as the winner of Lossiemouth, the winner of the Triumph Hurdle. But yeah, we just don't know how good they are going to be whenever they come back. I totally see Matt's point, and You Wear It Well. I'd throw Love Envoy. Well, I haven't pulled the trigger on the race. I'd throw Love Envoy into the run as well. And it's a similar way of thinking, actually, because she won the Mayor's Novices Hurdle 2 seasons ago, and then she bumped into Honeysuckle last year, and the 2 of them had a good scrap. They pulled well clear of the rest of them. So I do take Matt's point that she did have a hard race in the Fighting Fifth Hurdle on very soft ground on her seasonal debut, but she's tough, and we know that she's got really good Cheltenham form and really good Cheltenham Festival form. So yeah, they would have been the 2 at the top of my list as well at the prices.
Espoir de Laine. And you said it, and I was like, what's his name? Espoir de Laine. Yeah, for Gavin Cromwell in the Champion Hurdle. My thanks to Don and Matt. A long one there, but 30 enjoyed that. Plenty in it. We'll be back next week. There'll be interesting stuff coming up, leading up to DRF and Cheltenham Festival, with new guests and a race-by-race focus on the podcast. So do stay in touch. All we ask, if you are watching on the YouTube video, do hit that like button and subscribe completely for free. We will chat to you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.